Hi guys, let me welcome you all to another lesson. So in today's lesson we focus on trigonometric function interpretation. So it says the graphs of f of x is equals to a sine of x and g of x is equals to cos x plus 1 for x belongs to all the angles from 0 to 360 degrees. So this gives a restriction on these two functions. What this means is that the two graphs are bounded between 0 and 360 degrees. So for all x values in this region from 0 to 360 degrees, the two graphs exist. So the first question says write down the value of a. So when analyzing our function f of x is equals to a sine of x, we see that the value of a stands for the amplitude. So by definition, the amplitude for f of x is the maximum distance, the maximum positive y value from the center line. So for the function f of x, this here is the center line, and the maximum positive y value with respect to the center line is called the amplitude. So for the given case, the maximum y value is positive 1. So we can say our amplitude is equals to 1. Alternatively, you could use the formula. The amplitude is the maximum y value minus the minimum y value divided by 2. So for f of x, your maximum y value is positive 1. Your minimum y value is negative 1. So if you substitute these values into the formula, you get 1 minus negative 1 over 2, which is equals to 2 over 2, which is equals to 1. So our amplitude is equals to 1. The next question says determine the range of g. So when analyzing the function g, this function here, the range is all the y values for which this function exists on the graph. So firstly, we can see that the graph g is bounded between y is equals to 2 and 0, and the graph exists on these two values and nowhere else. The graph doesn't exist above y is equals to 2 and below y is equals to 0, but it exists everywhere in between y is equals to 2 and y is equals to 0. So we can say our range is all the y values that belongs to the set between 0 and 2 with 0 and 2 included, hence the square brackets. Remember that if you include the square brackets, it means these solutions are also included. And when we see on the graph, the g exists at 2 and g also exists at y is equals to 0. So the next question says determine the amplitude of g. So when analyzing the graph of g, we can see that this here is the center line for g. For g, this is the center line. Because for a standard cosine graph, this is what your graph would look like. But remember, there is a vertical shift of positive 1, hence the plus 1 here. So this becomes your new center line for g. So the maximum positive y value with respect to the center line is 1, because from here to here is 1 unit. So the amplitude for g is equals to 1. Alternatively, you could use the formula again. So for the given graph of g, the maximum y value is 2 and the minimum is 0. So if you substitute that into the formula, it's 2 minus 0 over 2, which is 2 over 2, which is equals to 1. So our amplitude is positive 1. So the next question says for which value or values of x will f of x be greater than or equals to g of x? So important that we also have to consider solutions where these two x values for which these two, f of x and g of x, is equal. So let's start there. So we can see that g of x and f of x are equal at x is equals to 90 degrees and x is equals to 180 degrees. So these two are solutions. The next part is to see where f of x is above or f of x is greater than g of x. So you can see in this region leading up to x is equals to 90 degrees, f of x is below or beneath g of x. So we cannot include this region. But then between x is equals to 90 degrees and x is equals to 180 degrees, you can see f of x is above g of x. F of x is above g of x. In other words, f of x is greater than g of x. And then once the two graphs pass 180 degrees, we can see then again g of x is above. G of x is above f of x. So the solution then becomes x belongs to all the angles from 90 degrees to 180 degrees, with 90 degrees and 180 degrees included in the solution, hence the square brackets. So the next question says, for which value or values of x will g of x minus f of x be equals to 2? What this means is if you take the difference between the y values of g of x and f of x, you get 2. So you'll see that when analyzing the graphs, this happens at 3 points. This happens at x is equals to 0 degrees because at this point, because you see that g of x is above f of x 1, 2 units. The difference between g of x and f of x is 2 units. 1, 2. So our first solution is x is equals to 0 degrees. And this also happens at x is equals to 270 degrees because you can see g of x is above f of x by 2 units. It is 1, 2. So the second solution is x is equals to 270 degrees. And if you minus the y values for g of x and f of x, you will see that this happens at 360 degrees because g of x is above f of x by 2 units. That is 1, 2. So the final solution is x is equals to 360 degrees. And the final question says the graph of f is reflected across the x-axis. Write down the equation of the new graph of h. So when you think of the word reflected, you think of a mirror. So we need to reflect this function about a mirror. We have to mirror it, and in this case our x-axis is the mirror. So think of the x-axis as a mirror. So if you reflect f about this mirror, you expect to see a graph of h that looks like this. So this will be our reflection about the x-axis. So for this to be possible, h of x then has to be equals to all y values multiplied by negative 1. So it's minus it's minus f of x. So for example, when f of x is equals to 1, h of x has to be negative 1. When f of x is positive half, h of x is negative half. So whatever y value you get for the f of x, h of x has to be the negative of that. Hence the introduction of minus 1. So this means that h of x is then going to be minus, and f of x is sine of x. So thank you for watching. See you in the next one.